Good morning, Dawn. How are you?
Good morning, Carrie. I'm doing great. It's great to see you.
It's so good to see you always. I always look forward to our conversations. Whether you know it or not, you drop nuggets constantly. Like nuggets, those little like shining jewels of wisdom. Like
Mhm.
you and I will be in normal conversation and you drop like a little nugget here, a little nugget there. I love it. I look forward to all of those like the little Easter egg surprise wisdom nuggets. So looking forward to today.
Well, I love it too. You ask great questions and you open it up. So it's all you. I'm really excited and I'm so excited to be introduced to your community. It feels amazing already. I cannot wait to be in Capitola. I'm really looking forward again because I went to high school in the area. So it'll be like a reunion for me.
I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
know if
really
I knew that or I forgot that. What high school did you go to?
I actually went to high school up in South San Jose. So I went to Leland High School.
Okay.
And especially during my senior year, but also junior year, whenever we weren't in school, we were in Santa Cruz or
Yep.
Capitola. And I just love it. I absolutely love the whole area.
Hmm. Oh, that's so cool. It is like a homecoming for you. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I am Carrie Arlah Burr. I am co-founder, co-owner of Breath+Oneness, a wellness studio in Capitola, California, as we mentioned, and we are hosting Dawn for a whole series of neo-tantra workshops. What would we call them? Teacher teachings. We're hoping to get all the way to maybe a teacher training or some sort of a intensive where we get sort of maybe certified. We've been talking about that a bunch. So really going in a monthly rhythm to build a lot of expertise and community around these topics we're going to start talking about today, and super looking forward to it. Can you introduce yourself a bit for us, Dawn?
Sure. Thank you so much, Carrie. My name is Dawn Cartwright. I have been studying and teaching NeoTantra for more than 30 years. I'm madly in love with the practices and just the whole philosophy behind NeoTantra. I currently live in Los Angeles. I've been teaching all over the world for 30 years and have trained many amazing NeoTantra teachers. And I love the work. I feel like now, especially everything in the world is moving so quickly, and a lot of it is tech-based, which is fantastic. And we want to nourish the intimate parts of ourselves, the human parts of ourselves. And Neo Tantra is a brilliant way of doing that.
I love how you just said that so much. It felt so true in my system. I also really love how you just celebrated the technology piece of it. Like it just felt like a really important like shift or frame or something in my system of being like, heck yeah, let's celebrate what's really working in that. And yet also that maybe I have a sense too of not letting that like consume us somehow. Or so then you like named this like maybe slower, deeper, more intimate human. And I'm like, yes, like that feels like such a good even like topic, meta topic for today, right?
I think so too, because we're always up leveling, hopefully, as long as we're alive. What is the definition of death? Definition of dying is when we stop growing.
Mm.
And it's possible to live right until you die. And in our intimate lives, this is so important because technology is here and it's amazing. And we want to harness it. And we're up leveling. We have access to more of our neurons are firing also. And we want to have these retreat spaces like we're planning at Breath+Oneness, where we can also nourish this technology in our bodies, the technology of the heart, the technology of love and intimacy and true fulfillment and meaningfulness in our lives. It's not an or. I always say to everybody, it's not either or, technology or intimacy. It's and. How do we create a balance and a collaborative feeling so that our bodies are up leveling as fast as our minds?
Mm. I love all of that. That feels so right to me. And it almost feels like sometimes the body, and maybe this is true, and yet I'm feeling it right now as you're speaking that like maybe the body's slower in a sense. Like maybe the mind gets things sometimes really quickly, like it feels fast at times. And then the body is like, whoa, wait a second, like slower, deeper, digesting, metabolizing, which is kind of a beautiful thing if we can actually stay with that process, right? And have it be more like that, maybe slower, deeper metabolizing, up leveling that is maybe at a different pace and yet provide such a gorgeous, it can be such an exquisite process to be really present to that, right? Slower, deeper
Absolutely.
process.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the way you're describing this because this relates to relationships. You know, our body has a rhythm, our mind has a rhythm, but also when two people come together, we're working with at least two different rhythms. So how do we find resonance? Where do we find that meeting point where we not only synchronize, but we amplify the best in each other? And so how can our minds amplify the best in our bodies? How can our bodies amplify the best in our minds? How can we tune into those different rhythms? And again, rather than making it an either or, find the resonant point, find the place where those two rhythms begin to amplify each other and restore us. Because here's the thing, when we're trying to keep up with a rhythm that seems faster, we can feel depleted. We start to feel lonely and we start to feel kind of crabby, you know, just things. Our system is giving us information that we're not really living. We're just sort of existing. And so the neo-tantra practices are beautiful because they're bringing balance into the entire body. And they're bringing that entire balance into the entire body by accessing our ecstatic energy, which is our life energy. It's the energy that makes us excited to go listen to music or to complete a project or swim in the ocean, whatever it is. It's learning how to have a real relationship with this energy through our entire being in a really conscious way that is very dynamic. And in that dynamism, incredibly still and nourishing, which I think we all really long for right now.
I think so too. I feel like I know so. Yeah, for myself as well as also all the community I work with, right? At Breath+Oneness, I have such a beautiful, kind of a constant relationship with community and with the people in my community. And I feel like we're all really longing for that depth and connectivity and that real deep feeling of, connection and presence in a really good way with life and with each other, with ourselves. So that I love, and I love that you've been talking about neo-tantra already a bunch, because I feel like that's a big maybe question mark for a lot of us, okay, well, what is neo-tantra? And I would even like to maybe back up just a little bit, because I feel like neo-tantra means it's new. And I have to be honest and say that I feel like I personally know not even very much about Tantra itself. So to even be able to appreciate what feels like maybe the differences or like the neo part of the Tantra. So maybe if you could speak a little to, well, what is Tantra? And then how does neo-tantra start to build or add or make it new or different?
Okay. Yeah, this is a really important distinction. I've studied both classical and neo-tantra, much more neo-tantra. However, I've had the really the great honor of being initiated into the classical tantric path by my teachers and my guru in India. Classical tantra is this beautiful, again, I'm going to use the word technology. It really is this technology of mantra and yantra, and how the existence, how creation happens in every instant. So it's this study of science of life, science of the sun. And it's actually, I'm not just using science as like a tag word or something. My guru, who's no longer in the body, is a PhD in nuclear physics. And Tantra itself is sort of demonstrating the physics of reality from my understanding. And so it's bringing together, bringing to life these secrets, these mysteries of life, how seriously, how you appear right here in this moment. And doing that again through ritual many times around puja, to the yantras, using certain mantras, certain offerings. And it depends, because Tantra itself has many lineages. You may have the Shiva lineages, and then you have the Devi or the Shakti lineages. You have the Vaishnavite lineages. So there are different lineages that access the divine or the creative potential or the seed of existence in different ways. And what I love about classical Tantra too, coming from India, especially the lineages coming from India, is that how devotional all of the practices are. Even though they're deeply scientific, these scientific concepts and principles are acted out through love, through offering flower petals and ghee sweets, ghee-laden sweets, and oil lamps, and beautiful mantras, and just beautiful moments of opening our hearts. And I thought, we have this idea because we've been Western, go to school, I need to learn it, and it has to be a formula. What if it's love? What if the secrets of existence truly are devotional and scientific? So that's a little snippet, and I will go much more into this, when I'm with you all in January. This is a little snippet of what Tantra is. Now, NeoTantra is.
Can you pause really quickly? Because I want you to go there. And just really quickly. So you said mantra, which in my understanding is like the use of phrases or words to invoke whatever you're wanting to invoke, right? And yantra, because I feel like yantra maybe is less known. Can you speak just a little bit of what that is?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, you're right. So mantra is sacred sound, and it's often the names of deities. It's different than kirtan. Many of us are introduced to the names of the deities through kirtan, which is a beautiful devotional Vaishnavite practice. These mantras are invoking the deity through the sound vibration of that particular deity. Very, very powerful. And the yantras themselves are the geometric. It's not a representation, it is the deity. So the yantra is the deity in geometric form. So you may have seen these symbols with many triangles, fitting together. A lot of times you'll see them in decor in yoga studios. And so there are actual yantras that are the deities, the specific deities. And in them, and within those yantras, there are deities living inside those yantras that bring them to life. So it's almost like a whole city in a way, I could say, or a whole, there's a whole cosmology in the yantra. So when you think of yantra, think geometric. And when you think of mantra, think of sacred sound.
Before we keep going, because we're going to NeoTantra, can we speak just a little bit? Because I feel like what you're speaking of is it's all relating to Hinduism technically, right? Like the deities of Hinduism, right? Which is also the yogic tradition and foundation, right? And I feel like, how do I say this? I feel like there could be a possible disconnection for someone if they're like, well, I don't really want to be a Hindi. I don't really want to, practice Hinduism. And I don't know if I really even believe in the deities of Hinduism. So why would I be like praying or singing or geometrically forming to like fill in the blank, right? So could you speak just a little moment to how like what that a bridge could be there, or how it translates, or just anything that comes for you when I say that?
Yeah, you just actually gave the intro to NeoTantra. So for many people felt like, okay, I respect Hinduism and it's a beautiful path. It's not my path, but I would still like to learn how to be in relationship with life energy. I would still like to develop devotion and meaningfulness. I would still like to be more conscious in every waking moment. And so that's NeoTantra. NeoTantra is just the practices around, developing that incredible consciousness in the body. Now, here's something people don't realize about Hinduism. Hinduism is actually not a religion. It's actually a way of self-actualizing. But, we think of it because that's sort of how our minds sort of look at these kind of paradigms. We sort of assign them to be religious. So sometimes it's helpful to realize that, yeah, it's a way, it's a very poetic way, of communicating very complex principles. And you don't have to understand the deities, follow the deities, be Hindu, to practice NeoTantra.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So NeoTantra. So it sounds like NeoTantra is a way to access these, maybe we could call them like intelligence points, or like principles or practices that maybe make it more accessible for people who are less interested or open to the more maybe traditional and what we might think of as religious path. And yet we can utilize or access the benefits of this in a way that feels possibly more open and maybe even like sciencey. Because I feel like a lot of people these days are really interested in that kind of, like, it needs to have almost like science backing or feel very like left brain happy, right? To be able to be like, oh, I feel safe and happy and comfortable with this. And I think that maybe Neo-Tantra has more of that. Is that true?
Yes, it's so great. I love how you're laying this out, because there is this, I think for a lot of us, we're brought up in a culture where intimacy and love, devotion, being present, having very, very intimate relationships that may or may not be romantic is something that we set aside and go, it's not really that important. But if you understand the scientific principles of how your car works, whatever, that's valuable. So it's a value conversation, right? And so absolutely what I did when I started to learn and teach, because I was really enjoying and had a very natural feel for NeoTantra before I even discovered it. So for me, so that people weren't calling me an airhead, a hippie, like all those things, I really dug in, because I have a science background from my degree at University of California, Davis. So I dug in and I began to demonstrate the scientific principles behind the more energetic and devotional practices. So yes, everything that is described from the intimate devotional side, perspective, has incredible scientific backup that I will share with your community. And this is really fun to sort of see what is the scientific ground behind pleasure, for example. How does that evolve us and bring us into a masterful intelligence? It's all interrelated. And but there's fear there. I feel like we've been sort of given these fears that intimacy is going to take us down a bad road. It's really, it's what we want the most, but we're very cautious, because what if it's meaningless, or what if I'm taken advantage of, or there's so much fear and shadow there. So it's actually cut us off from higher states of intelligence that the brain can only access when it's lighting up in some of those pleasure states. Bam.
Totally. Wow. Yes. 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 Please. Yes. More. It just feels right. And it feels like it makes sense. And I also love the naming, even though it feels a little hard and crunchy, to speak, just even start to speak into like the fear and shame that's been happening around pleasure and around intimacy and intimate relating. And yeah, I feel like that's, one of my personal impulses to why. So to name, I feel like it was a much greater spirit impulse. That's just how I call it. Just the sense of like sitting in meditation and getting this nice, strong sense of reaching out to you and asking if you'd come and offer your wisdom and your teachings to our community, to the greater San Francisco Bay Area community and beyond, because there's just like a spirit of intelligence to that, meaning that like life is wanting us to be doing this work. I don't know how else to say it. It sounds super hippie, and that's just how I feel it. And And I also feel a personal sensation of like, oh gosh, how do I say, like, get things back on a better track? Because I feel like, okay, personal life, raising two kids, right? My own life, right? Being a single woman, thinking about, just the dating field and relationship and all the things. And it feels like there's so much up around coupling, relationship, sexuality, what is even all of that at this point. And there is so much like almost shadow, I would say, shadow aspect to it that, like, I feel like you just named that, keeps us like wary, keeps me, wary. It could keep me guarded. It could keep me in a very big, like a space of contraction. It feels like the system is like, I'm not sure, as in contrast to what you were just naming, which feels just so much more connected, I guess, to life and the accessing of that intelligence that you're talking about. So I love that you're naming things that I feel like I'm directly experiencing. And also, just to say too, and this also kind of starts to bridge into where I also was feeling, where I wanted to talk into a bit next, which is, how does everything we've been talking about so far relate to, because what I feel like growing up, what the only things I knew about or heard about Tantra was like sex and like maybe even like wild sex or like, I don't even know, but it sounded super sexy. And so when we're talking about it way more from the standpoint of like how you talk about it and how I feel like I've been introduced to it by you through your teachings a couple times, I'm like, wait a second, it's way different than what I feel like I've heard of or thought of it before. So maybe we could talk into that a little bit too, is how does what you've been talking about relate to like sex? How much of Tantra is about sex?
Yeah. Oh, these are fantastic questions. And I'm so excited to meet your community and create these little mini retreats. Like, first, I just want to say I love your concept, because there's going and learning and taking a workshop, right? Oh, okay, I got a few practices and now I go back into my life. That's great. But what we're planning are actual still points to reset the nervous system into a more authentic intimacy alignment, let's say. Everybody that I've ever met has some desire for closeness and meaningfulness in their lives. And that can be accessed solo as a single person. We do not need a partner. When we learn to access this energy inside of ourselves and learn how to cultivate it and how to channel it in our bodies, it's a very real experience that then begins to loosen up some of those contractions that we have around being intimate in other ways, even being intimate and sharing our new project. All of this is intimacy. So it's not just sex. It's our ability to be seen, to be truly touched, not just to be someone who's going around producing things like, oh, I did this project and now I have a family, and, those things being something that's kind of separate. It becomes more integrated. Life becomes more integrated. We feel more. We're more radiant. We're more confident. We're more fulfilled. And having sex and being sexual is an addition to a fulfillment that already exists inside. That's what you'll learn through NeoTantra. And there is nothing like it, because a complete and fulfilled sexual being meeting another human being who is or is not taking NeoTantra retreats, there's potential then for incredible creativity and excitement and a feeling of real creativity where I'm moving with what is, rather than being very tight about what I do and do not want and do and do not accept. I can have boundaries, and the more clear my boundaries are, the more open I will be. The more I'm in that collaborative, very creative space with people. And this is what we're learning. We're learning to wake up the body, to become sexual beings. That's what we are on the most basic level. and then we grow from there. That is the energy we need to do everything we do. It's the root chakra. It's the beginning. It's how we got here. And if we don't know that energy, if we don't really feel open to it, then we're kidding ourselves if we think our hearts are open. That energy is energy that can open up in meditation, in yoga, in walking on the beach at sunrise. Like that energy is always there. It's not just when we're having intercourse. It's really important to realize that intercourse, lovemaking, is a celebration of that energy. It's a time to come together and explore a very heightened experience of that energy. But it's not the only place sexual energy is in our lives. This is a complete reframe. And this is a reframe that NeoTantra, our first retreats at Breath and Oneness will be about, who are you? How does your ecstatic body work? How does your body work? And what happens? We're going to talk about intimacy and the ideas we have and the labels we put on sex and intimacy. Take those labels off and still have boundaries, still radiate, and explore what it's actually like to take a breath and be in your body and have your sex be part of that. Right?
Yes.
I'm getting passionate.
I love it. Yes, please. Yes. Yes. I think that's that Leo sun or Leo moon.
Yeah.
It's good. It's so good. You said ecstatic body, and I'm curious if you could describe what ecstatic body means to you.
Yeah. So to me, there's how I am when I'm a little less than aware. Maybe I'm in a hurry getting ready for the day. I'm somewhat aware, but I may not be completely aware. My ecstatic body is constantly aware. It's that place of connectivity. And you've probably experienced it in a yoga class where all of a sudden you can feel the whole room is now moving and vibrating. It doesn't matter the levels. One person might be laying on their mat. Another person's a level 5 yogi. Another person's doing the best they can. But we've all entered into that ecstatic state, a state of connection, state of the body leading rather than the mind. Yeah. And it can feel all kinds of ways. Sometimes it feels pleasurable. Sometimes it feels excruciating. It can feel all different kinds of ways, but it's that sense of being a part of, being a part of myself, being a part of the community, being a part of whatever I'm doing. It's happening right now while I'm describing it to you. I'm moving into ecstatic state. It's a state of union. It's how we're meant to live. This is how dolphins live. This is how whales live. This is how, so many beings live. But we separate off from feeling that connectivity that is so essential.
Do you think you started moving into it because you were talking about it?
It happens all the time.
Okay. Is that something that when we practice that we can also kind of move in and out of, or?
100%.
I see. Okay, got it. We'll be more conscious. We'll have a sense of what that is. And
we'll spend the whole weekend there and begin to be comfortable in that way of being more in life and less in that sort of dead space that can happen, when we're too much worried about the past or the future. We're forgetting to, taste the strawberry, for example. We just forget. And life is a limited time offer. We are not here forever. And to be able to really experience how beautiful this life is and how extraordinary intimacy is, whether my heart is crushed or whether I'm met, with complete yes, all of it is so good. It's so good. And the NeoTantra practice teaches us not to have a hierarchy of better or worse. Still, again, have boundaries, have discernment, but be like, interesting, this is happening. What am I learning? How can I move into this and gain the wisdom and become an even more evolved human being and partner?
Yeah. There's so many topics, and I feel like, okay, so we went into that one. And so then I'm like, there, you say so many things that bring up so many like thoughts and questions and curiosities for me. And I had a sense of one, let me see if I can catch it again. Yeah, I feel like that ecstatic body or that ecstatic state was very interesting. It's just, yeah, it's very cool and very interesting. Okay, so the first weekend we're talking about, and really what we're talking about too is the levels. So like level 1 is really about learning self, and it feels like really being more in touch with our own personal energy systems. And I like to, like, recently I've been calling it like ecosystem a lot, because it feels like there's so many different terrains inside of my own ecosystem and different like climate and water exchange. Like there's just so many things going on inside of my ecosystem. So yeah, level 1 is really about like me getting in touch and really connected to my own ecosystem, and each of us in our kind of more individual, and I put that in quotation marks because it's, we can tune into that, and yet we're also all in a sense connected too, and yet there is sometimes a real need, it feels like, to really understand our own in like self, right? So level 1 being that, yeah, that's
Yeah, who really
January.
knows how to connect with their ecstatic body? Like, I'm sure there are many people in your community, your yogis, and we can always grow in that way. So the first level ones are all about you. Who are you? Who
Mm.
are you as an ecstatic being? What is your sexual energy? Who are you as an intimate being? And so it's really about your self-discovery and opening up these circuits, nourishing these ecosystems, this ecosystem of your body and being, really growing as a person in every way, like a person who has a career, a person who has a family, a person who is in love, a person who maybe is dealing with body things going on in their body. How
Mm.
do I access this very vibrant energy and allow it to flow into my entire body? You will all learn this. You will all be successful. I'm very type A. It's a lot of fun. And because I've been doing it for 30 years, I've worked with every kind of person. You will be astonished at what you will feel. So that's level 1, is who are you? Let's look at your body. And the practices are, some are done solo, some you'll do in small groups, some you'll do partnered. It's lots of different practices, but all about like, who am I? What do I need? What do I feel?
Mm.
What are those, what makes me up? Where do I end and begin?
If people are shy about their sexuality or like talking about sex, or like you said, like sexual energy, right? And it feels like, I mean, I would love to get to a place. I feel like one of my goals is to get to a place where we can talk and be in that space and not be maybe quite so like shy or reserved. But I don't know. For me personally, I tend to be a bit more conservative, and I feel like I'm maybe also, what's the word, like sensitive to like the more conservative people, and yet I also have such a strong sense of how important this is. So there's this both and happening for me of like, okay, how does one who is maybe a bit more conservative or shy, or like, I don't know if I want to like tap into my sexual energy in a small group setting or in a group setting, like what is that? That sounds scary. How does that work? Is it super like sexy? Is it something like, okay, let me say one other question that feels like it's related. It feels like it is that part of what you're saying too, though, is that it's really like this life force energy that can or cannot be like directed or even felt like in a sexual way, that it's really maybe more like primal energy or like life force, this beautiful connection to like deep vitality and life force in our own system that we may or may not experience as like sexual. Is that true? And does that bridge to this conversation of like, how sexy is it? And yeah, well, are we going to be talking about sex? Do I have to get into my sex body?
That's such an important question. One of the ways that I address this usually is I usually say everything is sex. Okay, so now that that's done, let's talk about what we're really doing here, because we have an idea that sex is intercourse. This is not sex. This is one little tiny thing that can or cannot be sexual. It can actually not even be sexual to have intercourse, to be honest with you. So what I'm getting across is that, yes, everyone will be respected. And this is not about titillation, and it's not about exposure. It's about learning how your body works, how to access your bioenergy in a way that nourishes you and revitalizes you. It's about creating energetic and emotional resilience, honestly, in your own body. So it's these, especially the level 1 practices and the workshop, will be talking about sexual energy, because that's one of the places where we tend to feel that ecstatic energy more. However, the workshop isn't about connecting sexually. The workshops are about connecting with your energy in whatever way it shows up for you, and only sharing and participating in ways that honor you. Everybody will be honored to whatever feels comfortable. And that's also one of my favorite things to do, is to create a very inclusive space where we can all have different goals for our work together, and everyone can be fulfilled. Because it's not that someone who's wanting to learn this in order to have better sex is less than someone who's learning it in order to have a better meditation practice. Also, the person who's learning to have a better meditation practice isn't less than someone who's wanting to experience more intimacy with their wife, for example. It's all good. It's all here. And so the practices are breathwork practices, internal yogas, some partnered yoga, teaching us how we're clamping down on this energy and how to allow it to be in our own body for our own circulating of that energy in the level 1.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does to me. I hope it does to others too. It totally makes sense to me. And it does. It helps me because I know you and I had talked about that a bit before this. And I'm glad it's coming up again, because I feel like I am a good embodiment. Like I can, it's the word, like, represent, I guess. I feel like some of the people, the humans that are in maybe a similar state of me, of like, I'm interested, I'm curious, and maybe there's fear or contraction around these spaces, like being too sexy, or I don't, I tend to be a pretty private. I have historically been a really private person about what I deem like my sex, my sexuality, my sex life, just anything related to that. I'm definitely not one that's like blasting it or sharing it or anything like that. And so I feel like the imagining of being like in a group and we're talking about sex, it starts to get into and so what I love is I feel like there's a growing clarification that this isn't like we're going into this like super sexy energy atmosphere, and it like tantra, in that for me, what was the past historical, like, oh, it's all about like sex and like kinky sex or something like that, clear that out, get way more like, whoa, okay, this is really about our energy bodies. It's about running my energy and being able to then also be available to run my energy maybe with someone else, or with the trees, or with beautiful ocean, or with my cup of tea, like running my energy with beings or other thing in a way that feels really positive and life. Like I feel it more and more like a really beautiful reinforcing of life, loving life, being in happy, positive, like regenerative resource, right? Experience of life, loving life, and being with life in such a powerful, positive way, which is so totally different, right? Than like the idea of that it's all about kinky sex. Did that make sense? Like that's maybe a rewording of maybe what I feel like you kind of said.
Yes. Well, I love number 1. I really appreciate your containment. I really hear, and I feel that's so important. Your containment, your privacy around, really holding that very sacred is beautiful. And that's exactly what NeoTantra is teaching teaching this sacredness, this understanding, and this honoring of however we choose to express. And in the group workshops, my forward and my focus is always self-actualization. So I'm in this and I'm teaching this as a way to actualize yourself. The practices are going to turn on the ecstatic circuitry so that it's clearing out whatever's limiting us from accessing our fullness, our true self. That's the ultimate goal. We talk about great sex in NeoTantra, but for me, the ultimate goal is to actualize. And just to share with you personally, I've realized, like, for me in my life, to give and receive love is my goal. And I have a lot of growth to do there. Like, I feel like I'm loving, but there's definitely more. And I can't see it because I'm in it. I want to receive my partner's love more than I do. I want to be more loving. And I know there's no end to that. But there are blocks and there are old memories. And by accessing this energy, which is neutral, we're using the word sex because sex is a way that we most often tap into it. We know it there, but it exists everywhere. And then allowing myself to open my body, to move those blocks and contractions that separate me from loving and receiving love in the way that I know that I'm capable. And that's also with my career and with my work and with my clients. It all goes hand in hand. And also, the beauty of this is that sex is beautiful, and it's not what we've been taught. It's so holistic. It's so natural. And the hypersexual world of the media has really done a big disservice, I feel, and separated us from the very natural moments of closeness that don't involve any body contact, and yet our union. This is what I'm transmitting. This is what I'm teaching. And really taking the shame off this sexual energy and bringing it back to its wholeness. Yeah.
That feels like such an important, it's it's like you said earlier, is that it's the foundation of who we are. It's root, it's sacral, right? It's like these low, deep parts of us that brought us into this world that are these foundational aspects. And it does feel like the current culture has, in so many ways, either intentionally or unintentionally, it feels so warped to me at this point, like the ideas of what sex are and what they aren't. And it feels like in some ways there's such a, I would say, at least for me, a desperate need to rewire, a desperate need to undo, to like somehow help dissolve a lot of ideas and thoughts and structures and almost programs or paradigms of what sex is and isn't, that are so not good. They're so not good. And probably, like, based on what you're saying, what I have a sense of is like that it isn't that. It's this weird programming, weird media, weird something that is just, and it feels so unsatisfying. It feels so disconnected. It feels so confusing, I would say too. Like, wow, like, blah, if I don't like that, and I don't, what do I like, right? And yet there's not, I don't find a clear message of what it is that I feel like we're really starting to talk about and land in this conversation, that I feel like you have a strong sense of, like, okay, guys, it's not that, it's this other thing. It's this like connection. It's this deepening. It's this love, this deep present love. And then, so yeah, it gets me really interested and curious about finding more and more what it is, as well as also letting all the layers of what it isn't and what's currently being culturally kind of repeated, that maybe we get to dissolve that more and more, and like liberate from concepts that are like deeply not serving us.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thank
It's
you.
an integrative experience.
Yeah. Well,
Finally.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I had one last, and I wanted to ask this just to be, because I do feel like one of the interesting aspects for those of us who are yogis, those of us who practice yoga, have been in yoga, and most of us know the asana practice, which is the physical poses and the flow. And, you and I spoke just a little tiny bit about that Tantra as one of the arms, one of the limbs of yoga, and how most yoga studios and yoga practices aren't including like the other limbs. It's mostly just that asana or the physical practice. So I'm just curious if you could just briefly name how Tantra fits into the limbs and what its place is.
Yeah, I feel like the way that it fits into the limbs of yoga, yoga is that union, right? And so the different arms of yoga are all different ways of accessing that union between we could say the body and the mind, or consciousness and the body, and so Tantra does that, classical Tantra does that through the yantra and mantra that we talked about before. So through this devotional, more ritualized practices. And so we could look at, these ecstatic states. If we then, go the next level to NeoTantra, we could say that these self-intimacy practices, these energy cultivation practices, are assisting us much the way asana does in removing the blocks to the full free flow of life force energy. And so, whether we're practicing bhakti yoga or jnana yoga or whatever the limbs, all these different ways, they all lead to the same place. And they lead to the same place inside the body. It's just different people have different personality types. And so maybe they're going to resonate with one of the arms more than others. And I think that, asana, I wonder why it was picked up and made so big, but it definitely has been. It's been fantastic. And I feel like Tantra is coming on the scene now more and more with some amazing classical teachers, and really showing us how this deep devotional practice and awareness and this discipline can also remove those blocks and bring not only the individual, but the entire planet into its full potential.
What does Tantra mean in Sanskrit?
Tantra means technique. There are many ways to describe it, but from the training that I had with my Trividya teachers, when you have the yantra and you have the mantra, the Tantra is what connects them. So the Tantra is the technique, it's the ritual, it's how it's actually acted out. So it's the technique, it's how things are brought together, how the sound and the geometric form, or how we could say the body and the spirit are woven together.
Mm. Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that. I feel like I have a much better sense of, the topics and the container and I know, I mean, I would love to have a few more conversations with you to get even more familiar and maybe build a little more comfort for those of us who don't have any little to no experience with this, and to help dissolve possible feelings of contraction or weariness. I think that's one of my intentions in having these conversations, is to learn more, to have a greater sense of what this is, and like remove obstacles and become more clear of like, oh, like what this actually is, right? And I have my own personal motivations, me personally, Carrie, and then also the communal sense of like, this is so good and right and healthy for us. So continuing to discover the hows and the whys, and so we could build familiarity and hopefully a sense of like maybe greater comfort or understanding, so that we're more in our yes. We can just feel a greater sense of like, this sounds so good and it feels really healing and healthy and all those things. So thank you. Yeah,
You're so
what?
welcome. And I think the way you've set up the weekends is so ideal, because we start with a candlelight evening. So very low investment there. You can come and it's more conversationalist, they're conversational, and there are some practices, but that's a way to sort of check it out. How does this feel? And then the next are the Friday nights, which are again low investment. It's just a few hours and you can see. And then the weekends, you have an opportunity to be on retreat, do a full day and really rejuvenate yourself. So I think the way you've set it up, and by doing these talks and conversations, we're able to create a feeling of hopefully of safety and invitation and welcome. And I can't wait to meet you. Like, come on in. I think you're gonna really, really enjoy it. I know that I do.
Can we have one quick, because it just came right there when you were talking about how much also love and support in romantic relationship. So how good this is. And I know it's a level 1 weekend, the first one. So it's really important for like self-cultivation, which is imperative in healthy relation. And yet how important and how helpful and supportive these practices and this can be for couples and relate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So much of my work, especially since COVID, is coaching couples who have grown apart. And these practices are so immediately effective because once we have that, we've learned how to activate our own body and how to begin to remove some of the contractions and holding on to the past. Then we can enter into a new relationship, and our relationships are meant to evolve and grow. And so for partners, this is such a wonderful way because there's no right or wrong. It's not you did this and you did this. It's being in your body, remembering what you love about each other, and then learning ways to up level together using your body and your energy and communication to do that. So these practices are outstanding for couples. And just so everyone knows, for 57 years, I was functionally single practicing, or, for 57 years of my life, practicing and as a single, and it was so valuable. And now I'm in partnership, and in this partnership, really, I'm so glad I've got the tools because it's very big. I'm with a Leo man. Talk about passion. I mean, how much love can you receive, right? So it makes it possible for us to meet one another authentically and grow together, and also for our relationship to be not only an oasis, but a reservoir of energy for the rest of our life and all of our goals and dreams.
I love that. I know we're finishing up. I just want to plug really quickly that we're going to have a Women's Day for the first, our first together, a Women's Reclaiming Pleasure, which feels massively important. I know I need it. I think maybe all of us need it to a certain extent, right? Because I feel like there is so much stuff in the field. And then you and I had talked about also doing something with the men, like specifically with the men and for them, and maybe even the next month, and how cool that is, men working with women, and then also just how it all comes together too, right?
It's amazing. I've done this for so many years. I love working with circles of women. I love working with circles of men. It is far beyond anything you could imagine. So it's just that rightness of going on retreat for a day, learning about your ecstatic body. And then we're also kind of talking about, sometimes what I do is I do the women's circle 1 month, the men's circle, and then we all come together using some of the techniques and devotional practices. And it's the most beautiful ritual that we create together. So that may be happening too, probably.
Yay, exciting. I feel excited. Thank you so much, Dawn. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you, and lots of nuggets in our conversation, like I alluded to at the beginning. So thank you for your wisdom and your presence and all of what you've learned and what you embody so beautifully. And thank you for sharing with me and with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your brilliant vision. I cannot wait to be in Capitola with you and everyone.
Awesome. Yay. Can't wait. Love you. See you soon.
See you soon.